I want to invite you all to take a few deep breaths with me. Feel free to close your eyes or slight gaze forward, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Inhaling all the positivity, exhaling what no longer serves you. And our last deep breath, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. I've held many titles in my life: college professor, councilwoman, entrepreneur, the daughter of Cape Verdean immigrants, and a proud mother of a 5-year-old girl named Reina. But there's one title that's changed me in ways I never imagined. I'm an addict and an alcoholic. Today, I want to share with you my journey, how I turned my pain into power. This is a story about healing, about breaking cycles of trauma and becoming the kind of example I want to be for my daughter and for those who come after me. Before we get started, I want you to reflect on a question. What legacy, what story do you want to leave behind? Not just for yourselves, but for those who come after you. Because the stories we create, they're not just about what we do, they're about who we choose to become. So, let me tell you how I got started. Growing up, my mother always told us not to do two things: steal and drugs. Stealing, didn't have a need for, but drugs and alcohol, that came easy. And to be honest, I was always a drunk friend, the one that when they announced last call was sprinting to the bar. But it wasn't until I got into an emotionally abusive relationship that things began to spiral. After I gave birth, the abuse turned physical. The first time he hit me, I told myself it wouldn't happen again. The second time, I tried to fix him. By the third time, I just went numb. Just like the first time I felt when I was abused as a child. Just like the first time I felt when my mom made me feel unwanted. I felt like a caged bird, the gate wide open, yet I didn't have the strength to fly. All my fear and unworthiness kept me weighed down. And that's when the cocaine and later fentanyl joined the list of bad coping mechanisms I had. And I thought I was managing it until I wasn't. I started skipping work, missing payments, pushing those I loved away. And worst of all, I was absent from my daughter. And then came the worst night of my life. I had a cocktail of drugs in my system. At least a half a gallon of tequila, a gram of cocaine, mixed with who knows what, because at that point, I really didn't care. And the cherry on top, sleeping pills. It was a disaster waiting to happen. And as midnight approached, I thought I should probably get my daughter to bed. So as I walked down the hallway, I felt myself getting dizzy and my legs giving out. As I turned the corner to go to my room, I fainted, hitting my face on the way down. And before I knew it, I was bleeding. And I thought to myself, am I overdosing? Did I overdose? And I never used Narcan, not on myself, but I told myself I should probably use it. So I put 2 puffs in my nose. And as breath came back into me, that's when I saw it. It was an image I will never forget. My daughter was staring at me, shocked. I stared back at her, shocked. She slowly watched her superhero fade away. I survived, but not without a scar. It's a permanent reminder that I was one breath away from leaving her motherless. I was one breath away from letting the cycle continue. And to be honest, that wasn't the last day I did a drug or I drank, but I did. I tried like hell to stop. I negotiated with myself that if I did cocaine, I wouldn't drink, that if I vaped, I wouldn't smoke weed. Like, that was a whole lot better. It was like trying to lose weight and telling yourself you won't have any carbs in the daytime, but you can sneak in a cookie or brownies at night. It's not that simple. But through the grace of God, 6 months later, I got sober. And today, I stand in front of you, 22 months and a day sober. Thank you. And on my journey of healing, I learned 3 things. Well, more than 3 things, but that's all we have time for today. The first was to acknowledge my pain. I call this radical self-honesty and acceptance. I had to acknowledge the pain. In recovery, we have a saying, we're only as sick as our secrets. And in my family, we thrived in secrecy. The things our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents didn't talk about, they get passed on to us through silence, behaviors, and even in our DNA. I think of my grandfather, who died by suicide in another country. I think of my mother and her untreated mental health struggles. I think of myself and my own thoughts of ending my life. And finally, I think of my daughter, who's now in therapy for what she witnessed. And I couldn't let addiction be the end of my story. So one particular morning, I made a radical decision. I picked up the phone, I called Butler Hospital, and got admitted into their alcohol and drug program. Walking through those doors wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the most courageous thing I've ever done. Getting sober allowed me the clarity of mind to deal with the things that life had in store. So when I'm feeling disconnected from my truth, I always go back. I always go back to something I call the truth inventory, and you can too. It's simple, but very useful. You're gonna ask yourself 2 questions. The first, what are you avoiding? What truth are you avoiding? It could be avoiding a hard conversation with a loved one, or even yourself, like it was for me. It could be an insecurity, because we all have them. And the second question I want you to think about is, what small step can you take today? What small step can you take today to face it? For me, it was journaling. I didn't have a therapist or a friend I could confide in, so I confided in my journal. For you, that may be naming the pain, it may be forgiving yourself, or you could write a letter to you or someone else. You don't have to send it, but just getting the words out is helpful. This first step is hard, it's uncomfortable, but that's where growth and acceptance happens. The second step in healing my generational trauma was to cultivate self-love. For years, I thought I was broken beyond repair. Trauma has a way of making you feel powerless, like nothing is in your control. But I knew if I wanted to show up for my daughter, I first had to show up for myself. I redefined what it looked like to love myself, not just in moments of crisis, but as an everyday practice. So I went back to this 8 dimensions of wheel. It was developed by Peggy Swabrick of Rutgers University. And the first dimension I had to tackle was physical wellness, because I needed to move. Trauma took all that away from me. It took my body, it took my mind, and I knew I needed to reconnect with it. So movement became my therapy, whether it was going for a walk, yoga, or a 30-minute fit body workout. I got my workout in. I have a picture of myself. I started at 0 sessions at the gym. Now, I'm approaching 1,000. Like my daughter would say, "Mommy, that's a lot of zeros." You're right. Mommy earned that. And we didn't just stop there, because that gave us a sense of accomplishment, a sense of stability, a sense of purpose. Now, nutrition and sleep are non-negotiables. We set boundaries for our well-being. And my family and friends know, Raina and I go to bed at 9 p.m. 2 years ago, that's the time I was getting ready to go out, okay? And now today, my daughter sets her own boundaries. She tells me when she's feeling restless and she needs some movement break. She tells me when she wants to relax and she goes off to her room. And watching her tune into her emotions taught me something, that healing always starts with us. So when my anxiety is getting the best of me, when I'm stressed or overwhelmed, I always go back to the 8 dimensions of wellness wheel. And you can too. And I ask myself these 2 questions. What dimension is feeling the most off to me right now? What dimension feels the most off that's causing me stress? And then the second question, was this stress response, was it learned? Was it inherited? For example, I stayed in jobs way longer than I should. And they drained me emotionally, physically, mentally. But I stayed. And my trauma response, my stress response was to keep working, overworking, putting in more hours. Who does that? Many of us, actually. And what I realized is that the more hours I put in, the more stressed I was. I still felt unworthy and unappreciated. So I decided to take a hard look at it and ask myself, what is going on here? So for you, you can ask yourself the same thing. What is stressing you out, and where did that come from? For me, I learned that behavior from growing up. We learned that you just keep moving through. You just keep pushing forward no matter what. And yes, that's helpful in certain situations, but in this one, it was not. So I made the hard decision, and I left. And I don't see it as failure, I see it as freedom. Because now, I no longer go to places and spaces that don't value me. Because balancing our wheel can help us break those cycles of trauma and move away from those patterns that we inherited. One day at a time, one day at a time. The third lesson I learned, which is my favorite, is to pass down something different. I couldn't break my addiction alone. It took support, community, and the biggest promise I made in my life. I promised my daughter on her 4th birthday that she would have a sober mom, and she does. That's a picture of her at Chuck E. Cheese for her 4th birthday. Thank you. I wanted to pass down something different, something I never had, a strong foundation built on joy, gratitude, support, and community. And these just aren't words. They're patterns and facts that we can use to break those cycles. Research shows that healing impacts at least three generations. And parents like me in therapy reduce passing on trauma by 39%. That's huge. And in meetings, in my recovery meetings, one thing that I realized is community matters. I was in a room full of strangers, but we all connected. We all came from messed up families. We drank at baby showers and funerals alike, and we definitely didn't talk about messy things like mental health. But in those rooms, we were heard. We were seen. We were validated. And that taught me something vital. Healing, it's not just about who we are, it's who we choose to impact. And I realized this in a call from my daughter's school. Whew. We all love those calls. Her behavioral specialist called me and said, "Can you pick up Raina early?" She called it early dismissal. Translation, she was suspended. And she was 4, 4. I took a deep breath, bracing for something big, like she knocked over a table. But no, she kicked the boy in recess. And that brought me right back to middle school, my middle school, where my brain didn't match up what my body was feeling. And I fought a boy. I flipped him over my shoulder in gym class. Back then, no one asked me why I lashed out. They just labeled me the bad kid. But I knew I wanted to be different for her. So when we got home, I sat her down, and I said, Raina, why did you kick him? And she looked at me and said, Mommy, he called me slow, and that made me angry. And I paused. I said, fair. I almost had to stop myself from high-fiving her. But I told her, Raina, kicking, hitting, that's never okay. But using your emotions, absolutely. And that's when I knew the cycle was changing. I fought in silence. She uses her words. Today, we have a life, not just worth living, one worth fighting for. I am at peace. I am at peace with my past. I'm actually grateful for it, because I wouldn't be who I am today. And I'm excited for the future. I live a life where I can work on my business full time, spreading my word of recovery, of mental health, of healing. And my daughter, she plays a starring role. I have a picture of her and us. She went to a recovery conference with me. And in turn, she took me to a Kids Bop concert. It's all about compromise. It's all about compromise. And one thing I learned is that healing, it's not just about overcoming, it's about becoming. The trauma, the pain, it didn't start with me, but it sure as hell ends with me. So at the beginning, I asked you a question. What story, what legacy do you want to pass on? Not just for yourself, but for those who come after you. Thank you.